It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. New Year's Eve, fresh snow, cozy nights, the kind of vacation where you could leave all the stress of daily life behind. My wife, Claire, and I had been married for 6 years, and I thought we were solid. We'd been talking about this trip for months. The plan was simple: head to a ski resort for a few days, celebrate the new year in style, and return refreshed, ready to face another year of challenges together. We arrived at the resort on December 30th, just in time for the New Year's Eve festivities. The air was crisp, the mountains were beautiful, and everything seemed picture perfect. The hotel was everything you'd expect, a charming, rustic lodge nestled in the snow-capped peaks. We checked in, dropped our bags in our room, and decided to explore a little before dinner. The resort restaurant had a warm, inviting atmosphere with big windows that offered panoramic views of the slopes. We sat by the window, enjoying a hearty meal. Claire was in a good mood, laughing at my lame attempts to make her laugh. For a moment I felt like we were back in the early days of our relationship, before all the complexities and the growing distance that had crept in over the last year. Maybe it was the quiet, the snow, the festive spirit, but I felt hopeful. Then, something unexpected happened. A man, around our age, sat at the table next to ours. He gave us a friendly smile, and after a few moments of casual eye contact, he leaned over and introduced himself. "Hey there, I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm here solo. Thought I'd join the party." His voice had that easygoing charm, and he spoke with an air of confidence that, for some reason, made me feel instantly wary. But Claire, always the social one, smiled back. "I'm Claire, and this is my husband, Ryan," she said, her eyes lighting up with the prospect of meeting someone new. They struck up a conversation almost immediately, leaving me to nibble on my food and half listen. Ethan was charismatic, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what Claire had to say. It wasn't long before I felt like a third wheel, and to be honest, it made me uneasy. Maybe it was jealousy, or maybe I was just reading too much into things. But there was something about the way Ethan looked at Claire, something lingering in his gaze that made me uncomfortable. Still, I pushed the thought away. It was a friendly conversation, after all. Claire had always been a social butterfly. It wasn't like we didn't meet new people when we traveled. As the dinner went on, the conversation between Claire and Ethan grew livelier. It seemed like they were finding common ground, laughing over shared interests. I tried to join in a couple of times, but I could tell I was being a little absent. I wasn't sure what it was, but something about Ethan was rubbing me the wrong way. When dessert came, Claire and Ethan toasted to the new year, laughing over glasses of champagne. I joined in, but I felt this creeping discomfort, like something was happening that I wasn't aware of. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then, the night really started to take a turn. It wasn't long before the drinks were flowing freely. I could feel the buzz of alcohol warming my chest, loosening my tongue. I was having fun, but I also felt something else, something I couldn't shake. And by the time dessert was finished and the clock struck midnight, I was already 3 glasses of wine deep, and Ethan was becoming more and more animated. "Happy New Year!" Ethan said, his voice a little too loud, a little too eager. "To new friends and new beginnings!" He clinked his glass against Claire's, and for a moment, I thought I saw the faintest flicker of something in their eyes. But the moment was fleeting. I chalked it up to the alcohol and the excitement. Everyone was getting tipsy, having fun, enjoying the night. Claire and I said our goodbyes to Ethan after a while, heading back to our hotel room. By that point, I was pretty buzzed, and so was Claire. We laughed as we stumbled down the hall, our arms around each other. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder as we made our way to the elevator. "I'm so glad we're here, Ryan," she murmured, her voice soft with affection. "This is exactly what we needed." I smiled. "Yeah, me too. Happy New Year, Claire." We got to the room, and Claire immediately flopped onto the bed, her laughter bubbling up again. I chuckled and joined her, and for a brief moment, I let myself relax. Maybe I was just being paranoid about Ethan. After all, What harm could there be in a little harmless conversation between strangers? But then, things took an unexpected turn. Claire suddenly sat up, her face flushed, her eyes bright with something I couldn't quite identify. "I think I'm going to stay up for a bit," she said. "I'm feeling good. You should get some rest. You're looking a little tired." I was about to protest, but the words didn't come. Instead, I nodded, feeling the weight of the alcohol in my system. "All right," I said. "I'll just crash early. You can stay up if you want." And with that, I turned over, pulled the covers up, and drifted off to sleep. But that's when everything started to fall apart. I woke up with a start, my head pounding from the alcohol. The room was quiet still, save for the soft hum of the radiator. I groggily reached for my phone on the nightstand. It was 9:30 a.m. Claire was gone. The bed beside me was empty, the covers barely disturbed, as if she hadn't even been there for most of the night. I sat up, squinting at the disorienting light filtering through the curtains. At first, I thought she might have gone out for a morning walk or a quick trip to the lobby, but then I noticed a note on the bedside table. It was brief, almost too casual. "Ryan, I went out for a walk, should be back soon. Don't wait for me, okay? I'll grab breakfast somewhere. Love, Claire." It seemed normal. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? She liked to take early morning walks to clear her head, especially after a night of drinking. Still, something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fog. But the more I thought about it, the more I replayed the events from last night in my mind. Claire was tipsy, sure. But she was always the type to tell me everything, no matter how small. So why did this note feel so off? And why was she so insistent on me not waiting for her? I got out of bed, trying to shake the unease that had settled in my stomach. After a quick shower, I pulled on a pair of jeans and headed downstairs to grab coffee. The lobby was bustling with people, ski gear everywhere, the sounds of excited chatter filling the air. But Claire wasn't there. I stood at the coffee station for a while, waiting, looking around, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. I checked my phone, expecting a text, but there was nothing. I felt a knot tightening in my chest. It wasn't like Claire to disappear without a word. And then I saw him. Ethan. He was sitting by the fire with a cup of coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone. His eyes flicked up when he saw me, and his face broke into a wide, almost predatory grin. "Hey man. Good morning. How's the head?" he asked, his tone light and overly friendly. I gave him a stiff nod, still trying to shake off the disorientation from just waking up. "Not bad," I replied, forcing a smile. "Where's Claire?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. I didn't mean to sound accusatory, but the words were already out there, hanging between us. Ethan didn't seem fazed, though. He leaned back in his chair and gave a casual shrug. "Ah, she's out and about," he said, taking another sip of his coffee. "You know, just enjoying the morning. We were talking last night about how nice it would be to hit the slopes today. You should totally join us." I stared at him, feeling a chill run down my spine. The way he said, "we," so casually, so naturally, like it was nothing. Like he and Claire had already made plans without me. My heart raced as the pieces slowly started to fall into place. "What do you mean, we?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't seem the least bit bothered. He smiled again, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Yeah, she came by my room last night," he said, completely unfazed. "We hung out for a bit after you went to bed. She mentioned she was feeling too good to sleep. It was a pretty fun night. Nice to unwind, you know?" I felt my stomach drop. The words were like a punch in the gut, but I kept my composure. I tried to think through it, to process what he was saying. Claire had been with him. After we'd both gotten drunk? My mind was spinning. I wanted to ask more, to demand the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to. My brain felt foggy, like I was on autopilot, simply moving through the motions. Ethan was still looking at me, his grin never fading, that same unnerving confidence radiating from him. Anyway, he continued, as if he were talking about the weather, you should grab Claire when she gets back. We'll all head to the slopes together. It'll be fun. I nodded, my hand gripping the edge of the coffee station like it was the only thing keeping me from falling. Yeah, sure. I muttered, barely able to make sense of what I was feeling. Betrayal? Anger? Confusion? As I turned to walk away, I noticed Ethan's eyes following me, too intently. There was something there. A message in his gaze, one that made my skin crawl. I made my way outside, trying to breathe through the thick knot in my chest. I needed to get away from him, from everything. I needed to think. But as I stepped into the fresh, frigid air, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too late. Something had already happened, and it was bigger than I could have ever imagined. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to face it. But deep down, I knew the truth. My wife had betrayed me. And this was just the beginning. I didn't go back to the hotel room right away. I couldn't. I paced around the resort, my mind racing in a million different directions. Every step felt like it was dragging me deeper into a nightmare, one that I had no control over. I couldn't stop replaying what Ethan had said, the way he spoke so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach churned with every thought of Claire and him together. It made me feel sick. After what felt like hours of wandering aimlessly through the resort, I finally returned to the hotel. The lobby was bustling with activity, families heading out for skiing, friends gathering for brunch, but none of that mattered to me. All I could think about was Claire. Where was she? What had really happened last night? I made my way to our room and pushed the door open with an uneasy heart. The room was quiet. No sign of Claire. No sign of anything out of the ordinary. I walked over to the bed, my eyes scanning the space. The note she left earlier was still on the nightstand. I picked it up again, reading it over and over, trying to find something, anything, that would make sense of what I was feeling. But it was the same. Casual, short, almost too nonchalant for my taste. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening behind me made me jump. I spun around, and there she was, Claire, standing in the doorway with her skis in hand and a bright smile on her face. Hey, she said, as if everything were fine. I thought I'd grab a quick run before lunch. How's your head? I froze for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. She looked so normal, so unbothered. No hint of guilt, no sign that anything had happened. But I could feel the tension building in my chest. It was impossible to ignore now. I'm fine, I said, my voice tight. I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I simply asked, Where were you this morning, Claire? You said you were going for a walk, but I saw Ethan downstairs. He said you were with him last night after I went to bed. Her smile faltered for a brief second, but she quickly recovered, setting the skis down by the door and walking over to the bed. Oh, you saw Ethan, huh? Yeah, I went by his room for a little while. He was having a drink, and I figured I'd keep him company. You were passed out, Ryan. I didn't want to wake you. I stared at her. I felt like I was suffocating. Her words were so casual, so dismissive. You spent the night with him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes narrowed, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her expression. Ryan, don't be ridiculous. It was just a drink, nothing more. You've been drinking too, and I thought you'd be out for the night. I wanted to have some fun. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something about the way she said it, so carefree, like she was brushing it all off, that made my heart sink. I don't buy it, Claire, I said, my voice shaking now. Something's wrong. I know it. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you have to lie? Her face hardened, and she stood up straight, crossing her arms over her chest. You're overreacting. Nothing happened. I can't believe you're making a big deal out of this. She scoffed, and shook her head. You've been acting weird all trip, Ryan. Maybe you should just chill out. I was stunned. Her attitude, her dismissive tone, it hit me like a slap in the face. Was this really the woman I had married? The woman who used to look me in the eye and tell me everything? Now she was denying everything, brushing me off as if my concerns didn't matter. I could feel the anger boiling inside of me, but I kept it in check. There was no point in shouting. There was no point in trying to reason with someone who wouldn't even admit what had happened. I know what I saw, I said quietly. Ethan told me you came to his room after I went to sleep. And you stayed with him until this morning. So don't lie to me. Claire's face flickered for a moment, like something inside of her broke. She hesitated, her expression shifting from defiance to something closer to guilt. But then, as if she had made a decision, she steeled herself again. Fine, she said, her voice cold now. Yes, I went to his room. Yes, we hung out. But nothing happened. You can believe whatever you want, Ryan. I don't owe you an explanation. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was admitting to being with Ethan, but she still wasn't admitting to anything else. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. This was happening. This was real. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I had to face the truth. Claire didn't care. She didn't care about what she'd done, and she certainly didn't care about me anymore. The anger I'd been holding back finally exploded, but I didn't shout. I didn't get emotional. No, this was different. I was cold now. I was calculating. Fine, I said, turning away from her. I'm done. We're done. Claire blinked, taken aback. What do you mean, we're done? I didn't look at her as I walked to the door, grabbing my coat. I'm leaving, Claire. I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine when it's not. Her voice rose, a hint of desperation creeping in. Ryan, wait! This is crazy. You're overreacting. But I didn't stop. I stepped out of the room, closing the door behind me. I had to get away. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. The weight of betrayal was too much to bear. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know how I was going to get through the rest of this trip. But one thing was clear. I was done being the fool. I would not let her get away with this. And whatever I did next, I knew it was going to be calculated, cold, and cruel. This was the turning point. I wasn't going to let Claire, or Ethan, think they could get away with this. They'd made their choice. And now it was my turn. I spent the next couple of hours walking around the resort in a daze. My mind was spinning with 1,000 thoughts, and each one made me feel more hollow inside. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing by leaving Claire, but in my gut I felt like I was losing something I couldn't quite define. Trust? Hope? A future together? I had no idea where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed space. I needed time to think. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of the resort, by the small ski shop, standing near the chairlifts as the snow swirled around me. I watched as people lined up for their rides up the mountain. They were laughing, enjoying themselves, completely unaware of the turmoil I was going through. For a moment, I almost wanted to join them, to escape my reality, but I couldn't. I had to face this head-on. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, checking for any messages from Claire. Nothing. Not that I was expecting one. But part of me wanted her to reach out. Part of me hoped she would, if only to show some sign that she cared, that she was sorry. But the silence was deafening. Then it hit me. The one thing I hadn't done yet. I hadn't spoken to Ethan. I needed to. I needed to hear it from him directly. He had been so casual about the whole thing. So confident. I wasn't sure if he thought I was some sort of idiot, or if he was playing some game I didn't understand. But I wasn't going to let it slide. Not like this. I marched back to the hotel, every step deliberate. I didn't care what anyone thought. I was done pretending. I was done playing nice. When I reached the lobby, I saw Ethan again. He was sitting near the fireplace, chatting with a group of other guests, looking as charming and easygoing as ever. His laughter rang out, and for a brief moment, I almost felt like the whole situation was a dream. A nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't wait for him to notice me. I walked straight up to him. The others in the group fell silent as I approached, sensing the shift in the air. Ethan looked up, his grin fading slightly when he saw the expression on my face. "Ryan?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, my jaw tight, feeling the fire burning in my chest. "Let's talk," I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then stood up, his easy confidence slipping slightly. "Sure, man. What's this about?" I motioned for him to follow me, leading him away from the others and toward the back hallway of the hotel, far from prying eyes. The tension between us was thick. The sounds of laughter and chatter from the lobby faded as we walked further into the quiet. We stopped in front of an empty conference room, and I turned to face him. Ethan's casual smile was gone now. I could see the tension in his posture, the slight unease in his eyes. "What's going on, Ryan?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "You don't look like yourself." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at him, taking in his appearance. He was still dressed like he'd just come from the slopes. His ski jacket was unzipped, revealing a dark blue t-shirt underneath. His hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes still had that same predatory gleam that made my skin crawl. He was playing some sort of game, I could feel it. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice low and steady, the anger buried beneath the calm exterior I was trying to maintain. "Why did you sleep with my wife?" For a moment, Ethan just blinked at me, like he didn't understand the question. Then, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he examined me, like I was the one who was acting out of place. "Ryan, buddy," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Come on, you really think I slept with Claire? You're not seriously going to believe that, are you? She's just a friend. We had a drink, we talked, we laughed. Nothing happened." I didn't buy it. Not for a second. "I don't care what you're telling yourself," I said, my voice colder now. "You've got her in your head. You're playing some game with her, and I'm not going to sit by and watch it happen. She's my wife, Ethan. Do you understand that?" Ethan's smile faded for a moment, but he quickly recovered, his expression turning more serious. "Look, man, I get it. You're upset. But don't go making assumptions. Nothing happened between me and Claire that you don't already know about. You think she's this perfect woman, don't you? But the truth is, Ryan, she's just as lost as the rest of us." I was taken aback by his words. There was something in the way he spoke, something that made me feel like he wasn't just talking about Claire, he was talking about both of us. Like we were all part of the same tangled mess, caught in the same web of lies. "But why?" I asked, my voice trembling now with the weight of everything that was happening. "Why her? Why do this to me?" Ethan's gaze softened for a brief second. But then he leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Because, Ryan, she's always wanted more. You're good to her, I'll give you that, but you've been blind to what she really wants. She wants excitement, she wants adventure, she wants to feel alive. And I gave her that." The way he said it, so matter-of-factly, made me feel sick. It was like he was trying to convince me that I was somehow at fault for her infidelity. That I hadn't been enough. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let this go on any longer. "I'm done," I said, my voice clear and final. "You and Claire can have whatever it is you're playing at. But I'm not going to be your punching bag. I'll let her deal with the consequences of her actions. But know this, Ethan, I'm not done yet. I'm not going to let either of you walk away from this without facing the consequences." For a long moment neither of us spoke. Ethan's eyes narrowed, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty in them. Maybe he hadn't expected me to fight back. Maybe he thought I'd crumble under the weight of the betrayal. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. With a final, cold look, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't go back to the hotel room after that conversation with Ethan. The weight of it all was too much, and I needed space, more than I'd realized. I could still hear Ethan's words in my head, the way he spoke so casually about Claire, about how she wanted more. Like it was a simple fact of life. But it wasn't. She was my wife, and she wasn't supposed to want more, at least not from him. I walked aimlessly for a while, my boots crunching in the snow, the cold biting at my skin, until I found myself near the ski lifts. The resort was still bustling, tourists laughing, the sound of skis scraping the snow, but I felt like I was in a different world. A world where none of that mattered anymore. I could hardly concentrate on anything else. It was like the life I thought I had been living had all been a lie. I didn't know how long I stood there. I didn't even know what I was thinking. The whole trip had been tainted, everything shattered by one simple fact: my wife was gone, and someone else was filling the void I didn't even know existed. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the feeling that I'd been a fool, clueless, blind to what had been happening right under my nose. Eventually, I made my way to a small, quiet corner of the resort near a bar. The kind of place where you could escape the noise, the chaos, and find some solitude. I ordered a drink, just one, and sat down at the counter. My fingers drummed anxiously against the wood as I tried to push the thoughts away. I needed to do something. I had to regain control, take back what had been taken from me. I wasn't sure how or when, but I had a plan. I couldn't go back to Claire like nothing had happened. I couldn't just forgive her and move on. That wasn't how this worked. I had to make her feel what I was feeling. I had to make Ethan feel it too. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Claire. "Ryan, where are you? I need to talk. Please, I don't want things to end like this." I read the message a few times, the words digging deeper, each one a reminder of how far things had fallen. I knew I couldn't respond immediately. I had to stay focused, but the temptation to confront her right then was overwhelming. But I resisted. I had bigger plans. I quickly typed a reply. "I'm not ready to talk yet." I set the phone down, my heart racing. That was the first time in our relationship that I felt like I was taking control. The first time in a long time that I wasn't just reacting to things as they happened. This time, I was in charge. By the time the evening came, I had a plan. It wasn't going to be a quick confrontation. It wasn't going to be something that I could just throw together. No. This was going to be deliberate, calculated. I wanted Claire to see exactly what she had done. I wanted her to feel the same isolation, the same cold emptiness that I felt now. I didn't go back to the room. Instead, I waited for Claire in the lobby, watching as the night unfolded around me. The New Year's Eve celebration was in full swing. People were gathered in the hotel's ballroom, drinks in hand, music playing, fireworks visible through the tall windows. But for me, the celebration felt like a cruel joke. It wasn't long before Claire finally appeared, walking into the lobby looking the same as she had the night before, beautiful, smiling, but there was something about her expression that seemed off. Like she knew something wasn't right. She looked around and spotted me sitting near the fireplace. When she saw me, her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly and walked over, a nervous energy in her step. "Ryan," she began, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" I stood up, my face blank. "We need to talk, but not like this." She looked confused for a moment, but I could tell she was trying to stay calm. "I don't know what's going on with you, but I want to fix this, Ryan. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just a drink. I swear, nothing happened. You have to believe me." I studied her face. The sincerity in her eyes, the way she was trying to control the situation, it almost made me feel guilty. Almost. But I couldn't let it go. Not yet. Not after everything. I turned, motioning toward the door. "Come with me. I'm not doing this in front of all these people." She hesitated for a second, but then followed me outside. The cold air hit us both immediately, and Claire wrapped her arms around herself for warmth. I didn't care about the cold. What mattered now was making her understand how much she had hurt me. We walked in silence for a few moments, the crunch of snow under our feet the only sound. I could feel the weight of her presence beside me, but it felt distant, almost foreign. I felt like I didn't even know this woman anymore. When we reached a quieter part of the resort, far from the main building, I stopped and turned to face her. "Ryan, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Just let me explain. Please." I shook my head, cutting her off. "I'm done with explanations, Claire. I don't want to hear them. Because I know what happened. I know what you did." She took a step toward me, her expression pleading, but I didn't budge. "Please, just listen to me. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have gone to Ethan's room. But it didn't mean anything. I swear to God, nothing happened." Her words felt empty now. They felt rehearsed. And it hit me like a wave. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't sorry for the betrayal. She wasn't sorry for the lies. She was sorry because she got caught. She was sorry because things were unraveling, and she wanted to hold on to the one thing that still seemed real, her marriage to me. "You think I'm stupid, Claire?" I asked, my voice low and cold. "You think I don't know what happened? You spent the night with him. You don't get to hide behind excuses anymore." For a moment, there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but she quickly covered it up, her defiance rising again. "You're being ridiculous. I don't owe you an explanation anymore." I couldn't help myself. I let out a bitter laugh, a hollow sound that echoed in the cold air. "You're right. You don't owe me anything. But you've made your choice, Claire. And now it's my turn." She looked at me, her confusion turning into fear. "What do you mean by that?" I stepped closer to her, my voice steady but final. "You'll find out soon enough. But don't worry. I'll make sure Ethan knows exactly what he's dealing with. And I'll make sure you feel the same emptiness I'm feeling right now." I turned away then, walking back toward the hotel, leaving her standing there, unsure, panicked. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next few hours felt like they lasted a lifetime. I went back to the hotel, trying to keep my emotions in check, pretending everything was fine when, in reality, the world I knew was crumbling. Claire was frantic when she came back to the room, pacing back and forth, asking me if I was okay, if we could talk. But I wasn't interested in talking anymore. Not the way she wanted me to. I had no intentions of playing the victim. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. Not after everything. And I knew I had to be careful. What I did next had to be precise, deliberate. I had to make her feel the weight of what she had done. Ethan, too. I needed to make them understand that there would be consequences. Real ones. I couldn't just leave. I couldn't let Claire think she could walk away from this. I had to make sure she couldn't look at him again without remembering everything that was at stake. I needed to know that Ethan would never think he could get away with what he'd done. And that meant I had to become something she wouldn't expect. Something cold, something that wasn't tied to the man she thought she knew. The plan started to form as I sat alone in the room. I'd ignored her text messages for hours. I didn't respond to anything. I knew she was panicking, and that gave me time. Time to act. I waited until around 11 p.m. The crowd was thick with New Year's Eve energy. When the ballroom was packed with people, music thumping in the background, champagne flowing freely. Perfect. This would be the moment they would least expect it. I slipped out of the room without a word. My first stop was the bar, where I caught sight of Ethan. He was laughing with a group of people, already a little too drunk for my taste. I watched him for a while, waiting for the right moment to approach. I knew I had to get him alone. I needed him to see what was coming. It took some time, but finally Ethan stepped away from the group, heading to the men's room. I followed him at a distance, careful not to draw attention. My heart was pounding, but my mind was focused. I knew exactly what I had to do. As he entered the bathroom, I waited by the door. A few minutes passed before I heard him approaching. I held my breath, and just as the door swung open, I grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around. He looked at me, startled, his breath smelling of whiskey and cheap cologne. "What the hell, man?" he said, trying to push me away, but I held him tight, not letting go. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice low, cold. Ethan frowned, clearly not understanding. "Dude, what's your problem? It's New Year's. Relax." "Relax?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You think I'm supposed to relax after what you did?" His expression faltered. He looked me up and down like he was trying to figure out if I was serious. But I could see the shift in his eyes. He knew. He knew this wasn't a joke anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to back away. But I grabbed him again, harder this time. "Don't play dumb, Ethan. I know what happened between you and Claire." Ethan's face flushed, and I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or fear? But it was gone in an instant. He shrugged and let out a dismissive laugh. "It's not what you think, man. You're being paranoid." I pushed him against the wall, leaning in close. "You really think I don't know what happened? You really think I don't see through your little games?" He tensed, and I could tell he was weighing his options, looking for a way out. But there was no easy way out of this one. Not for him, not for Claire, not for either of them. "I know everything," I said, my voice growing colder. "I know that you've been lying to me, and I know what you did to her. But you know what? It's not just Claire I'm angry with. It's you too." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You've got a problem with me, you come at me, man. But don't drag Claire into this." I smiled darkly. "You think I'm just going to let you walk away from this? I don't care about your excuses. I care about making sure you understand something." I leaned in even closer, my lips near his ear, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. "You're not getting away with this." He swallowed hard, and I could feel his pulse quickening, his body stiffening. He didn't know what to do, but he was starting to realize this wasn't just some angry husband confronting a cheating wife. This was something different. Something much darker. I stepped back, releasing him, but not letting him off the hook. "You'll understand soon enough," I said, my voice icy. "Now get out of here. Enjoy your night." Ethan staggered slightly, his face pale. But he didn't argue. He didn't say another word. He just turned and fled, disappearing down the hallway. I stood there for a moment, letting the tension dissolve, before making my way back to the ballroom. But my mind wasn't on the celebration anymore. It was on Claire. I had to finish what I'd started. I found Claire near the back of the ballroom, talking to a few friends. She looked up when she saw me, her face lighting up with a smile. But it didn't reach her eyes. She knew something was wrong. I could tell. Without a word, I walked past her and grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I didn't look at her, didn't give her a chance to speak. She caught up with me moments later, grabbing my arm. "Ryan, please," she begged, her voice shaky now. "Let me explain. We need to talk." I turned to face her, finally meeting her gaze. "Talk? About what? About how you and Ethan spent the night together? About how you lied to me?" Her face paled, and for the first time since I had confronted her, I saw fear in her eyes. But it wasn't fear of me. It was fear of losing control. Fear of facing the consequences of what she'd done. "Ryan, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, I swear." I raised an eyebrow. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You think it's a mistake? I think it's a choice, Claire. A choice you made. A choice that has consequences." She shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I didn't want to hurt you. Save it," I interrupted. "I'm done listening to your excuses. I'm done pretending that everything's fine. You've already made your choice. And now, you'll see what happens when you make the wrong one." Claire opened her mouth to speak, but I turned away before she could get another word out. I wasn't interested in what she had to say anymore. She had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that everything finally fell into place. The fireworks had died down, the party was winding to a close, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just started. My heart was still cold, but there was something oddly satisfying about seeing Claire, the woman I had trusted, desperate, scrambling for answers. That feeling of control was both intoxicating and bitter. I went back to the hotel room alone. She hadn't followed me, not yet. I could feel the weight of her presence hovering, her uncertainty heavy in the air. The night had been a mess of emotions and alcohol, but now, the time for games was over. I sat in the dark, thinking through the next move. I had no interest in dragging this out longer than necessary. I had to act swiftly, decisively. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about showing Claire and Ethan that I wasn't someone to be walked over. As I sat there, the light from my phone flashed on the nightstand. It was Claire. She had finally texted. "Ryan, please. I'm begging you. Come back to the room. We can fix this. I don't know what's happened, but I swear I'll make it right. Please don't let it end like this." I read the message twice, the words ringing hollow. She didn't want to fix anything. She wanted to maintain her illusion of control, to pretend that we could simply erase everything that had happened. She was scared, but it wasn't fear of me. It was fear of losing what she had. And now, she was panicking. She knew her world was falling apart, but she didn't know how to put it back together. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up, walking to the window and looking out over the snow-covered slopes. The resort was quiet now, almost eerie. It felt like the calm before the storm. And I was the storm. The next phase of my plan would be brutal. But it would be necessary. A few hours later, I got a call. It was Ethan. "Ryan." His voice sounded shaky on the other end. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything at first. I could already feel the anxiety in his voice, the uncertainty. He knew something was coming. But I wasn't going to let him off easy. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone cold, indifferent. "I don't know what's going on with you, man, but I'm just telling you, nothing happened with Claire," he said quickly, his words rushed, defensive. "She's just been a friend, okay? I don't know what kind of game you think I'm playing, but I'm not the bad guy here. I didn't." "Stop," I cut him off. "Don't act like you're some innocent bystander in all of this, Ethan. I know exactly what you did. And I'm not buying your nothing happened crap. You're not fooling anyone." There was silence on the other end. A long pause. Ethan was trying to come up with some excuse, something that could save him from the hole he had dug. But it was too late for that. "Listen, man," he said, his voice dropping to something quieter, more measured. "I think we can work this out. You're a smart guy, Ryan. You know this is all just a misunderstanding. We can fix this, man. I didn't mean to hurt you." I could hear him trying to backpedal, trying to smooth things over with words. But it was too late. I wasn't interested in talking anymore. Talking had gotten me nowhere. What I needed now was action. What I needed was to make him feel what I felt. "I don't want to fix anything, Ethan," I said, my voice colder than ice. "I want you to understand the consequences of your actions. I want you to know that you don't get to just walk away from this. Not after what you did. You don't get to pretend that nothing happened." He hesitated. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see," I said, and hung up before he could say another word. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent the hours plotting. I wasn't just going to confront Claire again. I was going to make sure she understood the reality of what she'd done. I was going to make her feel the weight of her choices. And Ethan? He was going to get his too. When the sun finally began to rise, casting a pale light over the snow-covered landscape, I knew it was time. Time for them both to face what they had done. I dressed quickly and grabbed my phone, sending one final text to Claire. "We need to meet. Now." It was a short message, but it was enough to get her attention. Less than 5 minutes later, she called me, her voice pleading. "Ryan, please. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Just give me a chance to explain. Please. I didn't say anything, just let her talk until she was finished. Then, with a slow breath, I said, I'll meet you in the lobby. But don't expect me to forgive you. I hung up before she could respond. The sound of the line going dead felt satisfying. As I walked toward the hotel lobby, my heart was steady, my mind sharp. Claire was already there, pacing anxiously by the entrance, looking around as if she were waiting for some sign that everything was going to be okay. When she saw me, her expression softened, and she took a hesitant step forward. Ryan, please, she said again, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I swear. I made a mistake. It was just one night. Just one mistake. You have to believe me. I looked at her, my gaze hard and unwavering. No, Claire. I don't have to believe you. And frankly, I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. You've made your bed. She flinched, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She was trying to control the situation, trying to manipulate the narrative. But it was too late for that. She had already lost. I paused for a moment before continuing. It's not just about you and me. It's about the fact that you thought you could get away with it. That you could just lie to me, cheat on me, and walk away without consequences. Claire's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. Don't, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You don't get to talk your way out of this. She took a step back, and I could see the realization hit her. She understood now. She understood that this wasn't just about her and me. It was about everything she had taken for granted. And now, there was no way to undo it. I'm done, I said, my tone final. And I think you should leave. This trip is over. For both of you. She stood there, frozen, as the weight of my words sank in. I didn't feel satisfaction nor anger. Just a cold emptiness. What we had was gone. And there was nothing left to salvage. As I turned to walk away, I sent one last message to Ethan. You'll know what I mean soon enough. I'm not done with you either. The air in the lobby felt suffocating. Claire's voice had faded as I walked away, but I could still hear her frantic footsteps behind me. She was trying to catch up, trying to plead with me to listen, to understand. But I didn't want to listen anymore. I didn't want to hear her lies. I wanted to move forward, and in order to do that, she had to understand what it meant to break trust. I stepped outside into the bitter cold, the winter wind biting at my skin, but I barely noticed it. My mind was elsewhere, swirling with a plan I had just set in motion. Claire might have been the one who cheated, but Ethan? He was an accomplice. And no matter what Claire said or how she tried to explain it, nothing would ever make me forget the betrayal. I couldn't let either of them walk away unscathed. I checked my phone again. Ethan had replied to my message. Just one word. What? I smirked, shaking my head at how naive he was. Of course, he had no idea what was coming. I had made sure of that. Now, it was time to show him the consequences of his actions. I didn't waste time. I called him, the ring of the dial tone echoing through the phone as I paced outside the hotel. The snow had begun to fall heavier now, adding to the isolation I was feeling. After a few rings, he finally picked up. What the hell is going on, man? Ethan's voice was shaky, panicked. I don't know what you're doing, but you'll find out soon enough. I cut him off, my voice calm but firm. You don't get to walk away from this, Ethan. You think you can just have one night with Claire, treat her like your little side project, and everything's going to be fine? Think again. He was silent for a moment, and I could hear him take a deep breath on the other end. Then he spoke, his voice lowered. Ryan, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know it was going to go that far. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You didn't know? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. You didn't know? You didn't know you were sleeping with my wife? Is that your excuse? I don't think so. Don't try to weasel out of this, Ethan. You knew exactly what you were doing. And now you're going to pay for it. Listen, man, I'm really sorry. I'll make it right. I swear. I'll leave. I'll leave her alone. Just don't. Ethan trailed off, his voice getting more desperate. Don't do anything crazy. Please. I could hear his fear now. It was real. He wasn't the cocky, confident guy he had been the night before. No, now he was panicked. Now he understood that I wasn't bluffing. That I was serious. You should have thought about that before you climbed into bed with her, Ethan. I said coldly. You don't get to control how this ends. You don't get to walk away from this scot-free. I ended the call, letting the silence settle over me. The ball was in motion. There was no turning back now. I returned to the hotel room, my mind clear. Claire was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes red from crying. She had tried to call me twice since I left, but I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear her begging anymore. I didn't want to hear her explanations. It was over. She stood up as soon as I walked in. Ryan, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. I made a mistake. I should have told you the truth. Please, we can fix this. We can fix everything. I stood still, looking at her. There was no anger in me anymore. Just a cold, empty resolve. I had no words for her, no sympathy left to give. You don't get to fix this, Claire. I said finally, my voice steady. This is beyond repair. Her face crumpled, and she took a step forward, reaching out to touch me, but I stepped back, distancing myself from her touch. Her hand hung in the air for a moment before falling back to her side. She looked at me with confusion, then with desperation, as if somehow I could be convinced. But I was beyond convincing. I don't want you here anymore. I continued, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. This is over. We're done. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lips trembled, and I saw the first real crack in her facade. She hadn't expected me to be so cold, so final. She hadn't expected me to simply walk away, to cut her off so completely. But that's what she deserved. She deserved nothing less. I'm leaving, I said quietly, turning toward the door. She didn't stop me, didn't say another word. She just stood there, frozen. I walked out, closing the door behind me with a finality that echoed in my ears. I didn't go back to the ballroom or the party. The celebration was long over, and I didn't care about it anymore. My only concern now was making sure Ethan knew the price of his actions. I called a car, leaving the resort behind. As the snow continued to fall, the world outside seemed muted, as though nothing existed beyond the cold white landscape. In some ways, that was exactly how I felt, numb, detached, like everything I'd once known had been buried under the snow, swept away by the wind. I wasn't sure what I was going to do once I found him. But I didn't care. I wasn't looking for revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to get into some physical altercation. But I had other ways to make him feel the consequences of what he had done. When I reached Ethan's apartment, I stood outside for a moment, taking in the familiar buildings, the quiet streets. I'd been here before Claire, before all the lies. It used to feel like home. But not anymore. I rang the buzzer, and after a moment he answered. Ryan? What the hell? What are you doing here? I didn't waste time. You know what I'm doing here, Ethan, I said, my voice low and unwavering. You've been lying to me. You've been sleeping with my wife, and now you're going to understand what happens when you cross me. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear him scrambling inside, probably wondering if he should just shut the door in my face. But I wasn't done. I wasn't even close. I'm not going to make a scene, Ethan, I said, my tone deadly calm. But you're going to understand what it feels like to lose everything. And I'm going to make sure that when you think of Claire, when you think of what you've done, you'll know that it was me who made it all unravel. I hung up and stood there for a moment, watching the streetlights flicker, the snow falling heavier now. Ethan didn't know what was coming, but I could see it clearly in my mind. His life was about to spiral out of control, just like mine had. And when he finally realized what I had done, it would be too late. The next few days passed in a blur, a strange mix of cold satisfaction and growing uncertainty. I didn't hear from Claire. I didn't hear from Ethan either. It was like they both disappeared into thin air. I half expected them to show up at my doorstep, trying to make amends, offering apologies, but they never did. The silence was deafening, and for the first time in days I began to wonder if I had gone too far. Had I done the right thing? It wasn't like me to act on impulse. I had always been the rational one, the one who thought through every decision, every consequence. But this time, the anger, the betrayal, it had overwhelmed me. And now, as the silence stretched on, I felt a strange emptiness inside. Was I really going to just let them fade into the background of my life? I kept myself busy, worked, ran errands, distracted myself with anything I could find. But the question lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind, what did I want from this? What did I want from them? The answer didn't come until I got a call late one night. I had just returned home after an exhausting day when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. It was Claire. For a moment, I hesitated. I'd been so cold to her, so deliberate in cutting her off. Why would she call now? What could she possibly say that would make any difference? I answered, my voice guarded. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then I heard her voice, shaky but clear. Ryan, I need to see you. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the blank space in front of me. My mind raced. What did she want? To apologize? To beg me to take her back? Why now? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Why are you calling me now, Claire? What do you want from me? I can't fix everything over the phone, she said, her voice trembling. I know I messed up. I know what I did to you. And I know I don't deserve anything, but please, please let me explain. Can we meet? Just once. I need you to hear me out. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to let her back into my life, didn't want to hear the same tired excuses. But part of me, the part that was still hurting from the betrayal, wanted to see her face, wanted to see if she was really sorry or if she was just desperate. I'll meet you, I said finally. But this is the last time. After this, we're done. The meeting was set for the next afternoon. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in the city, a neutral place, far from the hotel and everything that had happened. When I arrived, Claire was already sitting at a table near the window, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. Her hair was messier than usual, and she seemed to have aged a year in just a few days. I took a deep breath before walking over to the table. She looked up when I sat down, her eyes searching mine, trying to gauge my mood. But I wasn't interested in her gaze. I wasn't interested in her excuses. Not anymore. Ryan, she began softly, her voice so full of regret it almost sounded rehearsed. I know you hate me. And I understand why. I've destroyed everything we had. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know something. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk, but I wasn't really listening. I couldn't. Not after everything. I didn't mean for any of it to happen, she continued, her voice growing more desperate. It wasn't about you, Ryan. It was about me. I was confused, and I made a horrible mistake. I don't expect you to understand, but I need you to know it wasn't something I planned. I didn't want to hurt you. I stared at her, trying to decide what I wanted to do. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to tell her how much she'd ruined, to make her feel the depth of the hurt she had caused. But another part of me, the part one had buried deep down, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that there was a chance for redemption. But there wasn't. Not anymore. I know you didn't plan it, Claire, I said finally, my voice cold. But it doesn't change the fact that it happened. And it doesn't change what you did to me. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, but I didn't flinch. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "Please, Ryan," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't let this be the end. We can start over. We can rebuild." I shook my head. "You've already destroyed everything, Claire. You can't rebuild what's already broken." There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging between us. She swallowed hard, as though trying to find something to say, something that would change my mind. But nothing came. And I knew deep down that she had finally understood. This was the end. I stood up, ready to walk away, but before I could leave, Claire grabbed my arm. "Ryan, please," she whispered. "I'll do anything. Please don't walk away from me." I turned back to look at her one last time. "You should have thought of that before you slept with Ethan. You should have thought of that before you lied to me. I'm not coming back. Not this time." She stared at me, her face pale, tears falling freely now. But I didn't feel any sympathy. I didn't feel anything except a strange emptiness. The person I had once loved was gone. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same one who had promised to stay with me forever. I left the cafe without another word, without looking back. Later that night, as I sat in my apartment, scrolling through the messages from Ethan, pleas, apologies, rationalizations, I didn't feel a single thing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a dull, empty void. I had made my decision. There was nothing left to say. And then I got another text. It was from Ethan. "I don't know how to fix this. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you need to understand. Claire, she's messed up. She's not the same person you knew. I never wanted to hurt you either, but I care about her, Ryan. And I'm not going to back down." I stared at the message for a long time. He didn't get it. None of them did. They all thought I would forgive them. They thought I would just let them waltz back into my life, that I would offer some sort of mercy. But that was the last thing they would get. I wasn't going to let them win. The final stage of my plan was about to unfold. I wasn't just going to leave them to their mess. I was going to make sure they both knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything. And that would be the ultimate revenge. The snow had begun to melt, leaving behind a gray, slushy landscape that reflected the stark change in my own world. I had spent the last few days thinking, calculating. The silence from Claire and Ethan had stretched on longer than I expected. But that wasn't a sign of remorse, it was a sign of fear. They were both waiting for me to do something. Waiting for me to make my next move. And I had made up my mind. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone. The messages from Ethan were still there, lingering like unwanted reminders. The last one had come an hour ago. "Ryan, I know I messed up. I want to fix this. I'm sorry. I just want a chance to make it right." It was pathetic. He still didn't get it. He thought that after everything, after lying to me, sleeping with my wife, betraying everything we had, he could simply apologize and I'd come crawling back. But that's not how this worked. The power had shifted, and now it was mine to wield. The only question left was how far I was willing to go. And the answer to that was simple: as far as it took to make them understand. As far as it took to make sure they paid for what they did to me. The next morning, I drove to the apartment where Ethan was staying. I had kept track of where he had gone after everything went down. He hadn't moved far. Just a couple of blocks from the city center, in a nondescript building that felt almost too normal for someone who had just torn apart another person's life. When I arrived, I took a moment to breathe. It wasn't that I was nervous, it was just that everything felt so final. Everything I had built, my life, my future, had been shattered by Claire's actions. Ethan had been the spark that started the fire, and now it was time for him to feel the heat. I knocked on the door. A few seconds passed before I heard footsteps approach. When the door opened, I saw Ethan standing there, looking more disheveled than usual. He had his hair mussed, his face unshaven. It was obvious that he hadn't been sleeping well. His eyes were red, and there was a look of desperation that hadn't been there the last time we spoke. "Ryan," he said hoarsely, as if he hadn't expected me to show up. What are you doing here? I came to talk, I said, my voice sharp. I think we both know it's time for a conversation. He stepped aside, and I walked into the small, cramped living room. It wasn't anything special, just a couch, a TV, a few scattered papers on the coffee table. It looked like a place where a guy was trying to lay low, trying to avoid responsibility. But that wasn't going to happen today. Ethan closed the door behind him, his face tense. Look, Ryan. I know this is hard, but we can work this out. We can fix everything. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I looked at him, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. I was trying to gauge whether he was just pleading for mercy, or whether he genuinely thought he could make things right. Either way, it didn't matter. It was too late for that. No, Ethan, I said, shaking my head. We're not going to work this out. There's nothing left to fix. His expression faltered. What are you talking about? You can't just. You betrayed me. I cut him off, my voice getting colder. You took everything from me. Everything. And now you want me to just forget it? Ethan backed up a step, looking uncomfortable. I didn't want it to go that far. Everything happened so fast, and Claire, she needed someone to talk to. And I. Stop! I snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses, Ethan. You don't get to justify it. You don't get to make it sound like it was an accident. You knew what you were doing, and you went along with it. Ethan stood there, silent for a moment, as if trying to come up with a way to fix everything with a few well-chosen words. But there was no fixing it now. I don't know what to do, man. He muttered, almost pleading. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Can't you just let it go? Please. I'll leave her alone. I swear. You're still thinking about her, I said, a cruel smile curling at my lips. You don't get it, do you? You've already lost everything. You just haven't realized it yet. Ethan took a step toward me. What the hell are you talking about, Ryan? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took out my phone and pulled up a text message I had sent to Claire earlier that day. I showed it to Ethan, letting him read it. Ethan and I are meeting tonight. You might want to get out of town for a while. Things are about to get messy. Ethan's eyes widened, and he took a step back, his face going pale. What? What did you do? Nothing yet, I said, standing up straight. But when I'm done, you'll never forget what it feels like to lose everything. His face twisted with fear. You're insane, Ryan. Don't do this. Don't destroy everything just because of what happened with Claire. She was the one. I didn't let him finish. I grabbed him by the shirt collar and pulled him toward me, my eyes boring into his. Don't you dare talk about her like that. She made her choices, and so did you. Now it's time to pay the price. You thought you could just get away with this, but you're wrong. I shoved him back, letting go of his collar, watching him stumble back a few steps. For the first time, I could see genuine fear in his eyes. And it felt good. Finally, I had him where I wanted him. You don't get to come into my life and tear it apart, I said, each word coming slowly, deliberately. And you don't get to walk away like nothing happened. You're going to pay for this, Ethan. And I'm going to make sure you never forget the lesson you've learned. His breath hitched. He didn't speak after that, didn't try to argue or beg anymore. He simply stood there, staring at me in a mix of disbelief and fear. And that was all I needed. The next day, I made sure Claire was nowhere near the apartment. I had taken care of things in a way that only I could. Ethan didn't know it yet, but he was about to face the consequences of his actions in a way that would haunt him forever. The text I had sent to Claire had been the final move in my plan. It wasn't just a warning. It was a calculated message, one that let both her and Ethan know that the game was over. The tables had turned. They were now the ones who had something to lose, and I was no longer the victim. Now, I was the one in control. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The damage had been done. Claire and Ethan's lives were in freefall, and I had orchestrated every moment of it. I had made them feel what I had felt, the cold, empty weight of betrayal. The fear of losing everything. I didn't need to make things messy. They had already done that on their own. All that was left now was to watch the fallout. And I had no intention of stopping until both of them understood what it meant to betray me. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.